I built a World War Z game in Godot with Fable 5 and Kimi K3 to see who could do it better. Before we get started, don't forget to comment any game ideas you have for future videos like these. Also, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button while you're down there. Alright, so let me walk you through the vision for this project. The game begins near a safe house with a large wire fence separating the player from an open field. On the other side is a huge swarm running toward them. The player has to cross the city, shoot individual zombies blocking the route, and reach the endpoint before the swarm catches up. To generate our game-ready zombies, I used Tripo 3D, the sponsor of this video. Inside Tripo 3D, I selected Nano Banana 2 and ran 3 image generation prompts. The first 2 asked for a realistic, horrific zombie monster in a full-body T-pose against a solid white background. Each prompt produced 4 options. I selected 1 design from the first batch and 2 from the second. For the final character, I requested a scary pregnant female monster in a full-body T-pose. That produced another 4 options, and I selected this pregnant zombie for the game. I took those 4 images into Tripo's image to 3D workflow and used Smart Mesh to create game-friendly models at roughly 5,000 faces. I then generated the textures inside Tripo. Because this game needed hundreds of zombies, I also converted 1 model down to 500 faces. It lost some smaller details, but it still looked recognizable from a distance. That allowed me to use the 5,000 face models near the player and lighter versions farther back in the swarm. Tripo 3D also offers automatic rigging and animations, so this entire workflow can be completed inside the platform. Later in the process, I actually had to tweak some of the animations to get the desired visual results for the swarm. I've been working on a zombie swarm engine to get similar results to the World War Z game, so I used that repo for the AIs to use and optimize during this task. Fable went first. I gave it the existing repository and told it to use beans as placeholder zombies until the core mechanic worked. The first version already had sprinting, jumping, shooting, a destination, and a swarm climbing over the fence. The problem was that the player was much faster than the zombies. The map was one straight street, and aiming wasn't clear. I asked Fable to switch the game into first person, increase the size and speed of the swarm, and rebuild the city with multiple blocks and obstacles. That made the chase more intense, but Fable also allowed the player to climb entire buildings. I limited climbing to smaller walls and vehicles, changed the safe house design, and added a button that let me look backward while continuing to run. That became an important part of the game because it allowed me to track the swarm without stopping. Once the mechanic worked, I gave Fable the Tripo Zombie Pack. The first integration had the zombies running sideways and using the wrong animations. Because the animation names were unclear, I renamed them in Noir Stage and gave Fable more specific instructions. This is when I dropped the zombies into the Noir Stage app so that I can properly label each animation and make any other necessary manual adjustments. After another correction, the running, falling, and death animations worked. I added the detailed and lightweight zombie versions, multiple character designs, and different running animations. For climbing, I used a crawling animation rotated vertically, which created the wall climbing effect I wanted. The next problem was the environment. Some building textures were facing the wrong direction, and performance dropped to around 2 or 3 frames per second in my test. Fable identified shadows across the swarm as a major performance issue. After optimizing them and reducing unnecessary work farther from the player, the game ran between roughly 24 and 65 frames per second during my test. For the final pass, I added a crosshair, a first-person rifle, a stampede rumble, and camera shake that increased as the swarm approached. Let's take a look at the final gameplay from Fable before moving on to Kimi K3. Up next we had Kimi K3, which at the time of this recording had just been released. I used Kimi K3 with Swarm enabled, max thinking, and the extra long context window. Kimi received the same initial brief and used 4 agents for its first run. Its map immediately stood out. It appeared larger, had more buildings, and included a clean sunset-style lighting setup. The swarm, sprinting, shooting, wind condition, and loss condition all worked. The biggest problem was that the camera was locked in one direction and the route was still mostly a straight line. Because Kimi's runs were taking longer, I bundled the remaining changes into one large prompt. I requested proper first-person controls, a faster and larger swarm, more obstacles, the Tripo zombie models and animations, better materials, sound effects, camera rumbling, and performance optimization. Kimi deployed roughly 6 agents, and that run took around 2 to 3 hours. The finished version displayed approximately 68 frames per second in my test, and the city still looked good. However, the swarm textures were incorrect. The zombies climbed sideways, and the player felt too slow. One individual zombie near the starting area looked correct, so the asset itself had imported properly. The main problem was how the swarm was using it. I asked Kimi to make one smaller correction using K3 High. That still took approximately 30 to 40 minutes, and the texture problem remained. Kimi created my favorite map and one of the strongest environments, but its long iteration time made final polishing difficult. I would consider using Kimi to create the foundation and then switching to another model for smaller corrections. Fable produced the most complete documented swarm mechanic. Kimi produced my favorite city but struggled with asset integration and iteration speed. If you want to generate your own game-ready 3D assets, click the link below and you'll get 500 bonus credits. And if you use the discount code TRIPO, you'll get an additional 60% off of the Pro plan, making it only $8 to get started. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.